we are certainly executing today, and I'm excited about this. The mission of CannabizMD is to educate, build, and engage an ecosystem of cannabis industry stakeholders that are committed to optimal patient and product outcomes. So leading into that, it's my pleasure to welcome Emily and to this clinical panel where our experts are going to discuss current-based evidence or current evidence-based science as it relates to medical cannabis, including interactions with the endocannabinoid system, clinical pharmacology, dosing, delivery, therapeutics, and integrative care. And we are missing Dr. Uma, who's right there, and we're ready for you. Okay.
All right. Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Emily Jacobs. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. And I have to say, when I decided to join the master's program at the University of Maryland, I was doing it with no support in my employer. Within my employer, it was a large hospital system in Northern Virginia. I had colleagues that I had worked in the ER with for over 10 years, and I know they respected me a whole lot because you got to respect your teammates in the ER, right? They all thought I was crazy. They had no idea. They also didn't know what my own medical personal story was with cannabis at all. And now I'm in a position where here we are. I have incredible, well-respected medical colleagues, legal colleagues, et cetera, and we are building this industry. So in 2 short years for me, it got to this point, and that's very exciting. So I know I'm relatively new here, being only a few years in. Some of you have been doing this a very long time, and I just want to say I really appreciate that you're all here doing this. So let's get talking about cannabis and clinical practice here. Again, I'm really excited to have this panel here, and I will just let you each introduce yourselves about 2 minutes or so. And Brian, why don't we start with you?
Hello. How you doing, everybody? My name is Brian Essenter. I'm a pharmacist and cannabis pharmacist from Connecticut. I worked in retail pharmacy for about 16 years and for Walgreens, actually, unfortunately. And you know, as you can see when you walk into any pharmacy, it's one of the most miserable existences around at this point. And so, yeah, you know, exactly. Well, you know, you go to school and the intention is to go out and help patients and have positive impacts on their healthcare and their outcomes. And the reality is in retail pharmacy, at least, that's just not happening. You don't have that opportunity. Your time is spent, you know, arguing with insurance companies and doctors about what's covered and what isn't and why, and then explaining it to the patients. And it's just not what we had expected it to be. And I think that's why many of us are here is we've become sort of disgruntled with the healthcare system as it is. It's not really helping patients. It's really just kind of, you know, putting them through the mill. So I had an opportunity in 2015 to join the cannabis industry in Connecticut, where they require pharmacists to run the dispensaries. So I've been doing that for about 9 years now. I opened my own practice in 2018, counseling patients outside of the dispensary and consulting as well. Because one of the things that I learned was that patients don't always want to go pay a doctor a fee to then get certified, to then pay the state another fee just to walk in and find out if cannabis is even for them. Many of them just want to try CBD or just have questions and don't want to have to go through the whole process just to talk to somebody that might have an idea of what they're doing. So again, really just trying to get the education out there, spread the word. And also, you know, I'm actually working with John Patrick University. I'm getting my master's right now as well. And, you know, it's really about educating our healthcare professionals, kind of like what we've been talking about here today is what it's been for me. They are the ones that patients expect answers from. You know, they're getting them from the bud tenders, unfortunately, but they really want them from their doctors, from their clinicians and their providers because they feel like they can trust them. And that's really where they want that information to come from. And we need to make sure that they are educated in this and can have those intelligent conversations with patients as well. So that's me. That's kind of what I've been doing for the past 9 years or so, and looking forward to talking to more.
Good morning. I am Robin Belle Harrison, newlywed. Thank you. And you will all be glad to know that cannabis is the reason that I met my husband. We met at Patients Out of Time in 2019, and he will tell you, some of you have met him, that when we first met, there was no romantic spark, and there was not. He will tell you he wanted to drown me in the pool, which he did. And fast forward 2 years later, we got married. So cannabis is definitely a friend in our family. I'm a registered nurse by training with a business in background and in government relations. I have a staffing company. We work with people that are chronically ill, supporting them with nurse staffing for IG therapies and enzyme replacement therapies. We work with a lot of people who are on the spectrum. We also work with a lot of people who have PANDAS, which is a pediatric autoimmune neuropathy, encephalitis. I came to cannabis through my love of healing and integrative medicine, and also as a businesswoman, seeing that there is a large gap, not just with equity in different communities, minority communities, but women's health as well. And I come from a family with a very deep medical background. My father was a physician. My husband is a physician. My brother is a physician. I'm a registered nurse. And then everybody else are lawyers. So go figure. We are at the nexus of, I think, an enormous opportunity with cannabis, whole plant medicine and healing. Everyone in this room understands that, and that is really the gospel that I preach to everyone. I cannot emphasize enough the amount of harm that I have seen in my professional career with polypharmacy. And I am not anti-Western medicine by any means, but I think that this is the opportunity for all of us to bring whole plant medicine and healing together with Western medicine to keep everyone healthy, mentally healthy and physically healthy. And I believe that cannabis is really the tip of the spear when it comes to meaningful health for everyone. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I thank Jackie and company for the opportunity to sit on this panel with Dr. Uma. And everyone else. So that's my story. And I certainly hope to continue to be able to spread the word with everyone here in this room and also with our people that are on the Zoom meeting. Oh, and before I forget, I am a founding member of the Cannabis Nurses of Color, which is how I came to be here. So we are an offshoot of the American Cannabis Nurses Association, and there are many registered nurses, nurse practitioners, DNPs, et cetera, that are very involved with cannabis and with other natural plant medicines. So I wanted to give a shout out to all of my group out there. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. What a pleasure and truly last minute, but I'm very happy to be here today. My name is Dr. Uma Dhanabalan, and I'm originally from India, and I've been in this country since 1970. And my background actually comes from where my grandmother, who didn't read or write, was a shaman in the village. She looked at you, she went out there, she got her herbs. She maybe touched you, maybe didn't even need to touch you. But that was the extreme that I came from, where my roots were from the village. I've had many, many, many years of education. I've been a lab rat. I started working in research, believe it or not, when I was about 10 years old, visiting the laboratories, from animal research to tissue culture to human research, cancer research to infertility research, and the list goes on. And also many, many chemotherapy drugs. I'm very fortunate that I've had many detours, and finally I finished my medical school, and I did my first residency in family medicine in Charleston, South Carolina. I did my second life here at Harvard. I did my residency in occupational environmental medicine. I did a fellowship in heavy metals and my master's in public health. I also have experienced the corporate world. I was the regional medical director for Kimberly-Clark for Asia Pacific. So I got to see what the world is looking for on a corporate level. I got to work with thousands and thousands of patients and interact with laws, policymakers, products, and even fatalities. So I've seen what the impact of what occupation environmental medicine has. And I know that in the cannabis industry, we're seeing all of this. And I've been warned, and I've been warning people the potentials of harm from this plant and the workers that face industry where it's not regulated. Federal regulations hold the liability for this, and I'm going to say that very clear. It's because we don't have it descheduled, and the United States of America has a lot to do with it. So I've been an international speaker. I've been involved with countries that have legalized, and I'm very proud of what I do. And Massachusetts is my own backyard, and I see the true difference between diversity, inequality, and equity. And these are all very important parts of this plant. I look at this plant for two purposes. It's all medical, folks. Don't let them confuse you. No other system is thought of as medical or recreational. We never talk about our cardiac system working medically and recreationally. We don't talk about our pulmonary systems working, but there's a system known as the endocannabinoid system that too works medically. And we should not be referring to this plant for medical or recreational purposes. It's all medical. I look at it for medical and industrial purposes throughout the world. I talk about cannabis as a global solution. I talk about cannabis as the exit drug, not the gateway drug. If anything, it's an entrance to a better quality of life. That's what I call it. It's an exit from pharmaceuticals, narcotics, alcohol, and nicotine. As a physician, I called it the party pack of 5. I dealt with it day in and day out, day in and day out. Blood pressure, diabetes, hyperlipidemia, something for reflux, something for anxiety or depression, with no exit plan. We wrote these prescriptions, polypharmacy. You had a side effect, we got a pill for that. We've got pills and pills and pills, but no exit plan. That's why my journey turned when I got involved in this, because my mother died of an illness known as idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, meaning we don't know what caused your lung disease. And in 2010 is when my journey began, and it continues, and I'm very proud to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you all. And truly, I mean, what a wonderful setup from each of you. Thank you, because we're obviously going to touch on all of these topics. You know, I heard each of you mention polypharmacy, and I'm really curious. I'm sure you have patients that come to you looking for relief, and they're already on this list of medications. And I think there's a lot of things to sort of peel away here, because patients are looking for relief. They don't necessarily have the education. You can't write a prescription for cannabis. So when especially seniors, right, when they come to you looking for guidance and you can't write a prescription, how do you each approach that? And who would like to start today? Dr. Uma?
Yeah, so, you know, my youngest in my clinic is 2. I really get to practice family medicine, and my eldest is 98. So when my seniors come in, they come in with a little attitude and a little sass, you know, and I have 3 sets of patients that walk in through my door. Patients that are cannabis naive, patients that have been self-medicating, and that's the word we should be using, self-medicating, not recreational users or self-medicating. They've been using it. And patients that have been prior users. They used it in life and drug testing. That's another part of my world, is I'm also a medical review officer. Got in their way. So with these patients, what I do is we actually spend almost an hour on an initial visit. We start out with what they want to start with. Start with one medication that they want to concentrate on, and then ask them what they're open to, because some will say, I don't want to smoke. Oh, I don't want to smoke, period. And we'll give them topicals or tinctures or whatever they want. And I have 3 basic rules that we start with. Dr. Uma has the word titrate. We don't use the word dose in my clinic. We use the word titrate. And the 3 rules are, rule number 1, always hydrate before you medicate. Because patients are very dehydrated and they're very anxious And so if you don't hydrate, you're setting them up for failure. So that's the first thing. And seniors are also very scared of drinking water because they're afraid they may have to pee. Okay, so this is real. So you got to explain that to them. Rule number 2, you got to tell them they got to have food because their blood sugar is going to drop. And if you've ever felt hypoglycemic, it's a very scary feeling. So you got to make sure you have food on board. And the third Dr. Uma's rule is journal, because today might be different than tomorrow or what you had yesterday. So 3 key words: hydrate, food, and journal. And this is how we start with anybody, but mainly with our seniors, and titrate a little bit at a time. And usually they come in 3 months later and they say, I got me a pipe. And so they're ready to start smoking.
Okay, and Robin?
Many of the patients that come to us are on immune system boosters, IV immune system boosters. A lot of neurology patients, rheumatology, immunological patients. And so they already come with a laundry list of polypharmacy that they're taking from their various physicians. Many of them have been self-medicating and just want some guidance as to, am I on the right track? And so it has to be a separate conversation because that is not my role when we are infusing them. So in a separate conversation that I will have with them, I will say, let's look at your drugs that you're taking. And a lot of their physicians are not versed in cannabis and do not understand how it works in the body. And so I just kind of give them a breakdown and as to where they are and what possibly could work for them. It's a decision that they have to make. I cannot really give them official advice considering what it is they're taking, unless it's offline, which I'm more than happy to do. But many people are self-medicating, and hydration is huge. I don't care who you are. Almost everyone in this room right now, including me this morning, is dehydrated. And so without hydration, your body, your cells are just not regenerating. They're not replenishing. We all need to be well hydrated. But many people are self-medicating for a number of reasons. Pain is usually the first thing. And then I would say anxiety is number 2, especially after post-pandemic. People have been dealing with a lot of issues, mental health issues. Most people don't want to smoke, especially older patients. So again, I agree with you. Topicals, tinctures, gummies, and this is, I promise, not a plug for WANA. I promise you, this is not a plug. I carry these. These are some of the best gummies ever. So for me personally, I use them to help me sleep. But in terms of most people, it's pain, anxiety, and that's what people are looking for. And they just need guidance as to, am I doing this the right way? Am I, what? And there's no help in the dispensaries. The bud tenders are very well intentioned, but it's my contention that any dispensary, any and all dispensaries should have a pharmacist, a physician, and a registered nurse that all are cannabis experts.
Oh, I love that idea.
Cheers.
Yeah. Can we get this thing going now?
Yeah, right. Okay. So I have a little bit of a different position and view on things because I'm actually physically in the dispensary, having conversations with the patients as they come up to the counter and can provide them with the product right away. In Connecticut, having those pharmacists there for new patients, we can do a full intake with a patient. So they're filling out paperwork with their condition, their prescription medications, what type of symptoms they're having, what type of products that they would like to use, what their cannabis use history has been like. Are they naive? Are they new? Are they, a user for many years? So we have very different conversations. But the thing that we start with, or that I start with, is, what are your goals? What do you want to get out of this? Are you looking for pain relief, sleep, And are you looking to decrease prescription medications? So, and you have to consider who the patients are that you're dealing with. These are not your average person walking in off the street. The people that are getting certified, especially with medical cards, are the most extreme cases. They're not being managed properly with prescription medications already, and they have a whole lot of them because nothing is managing things properly. So usually the goal is some sort of, like you said, pain, sleep are the two biggest things that we really find people are looking for. So it's a matter of helping them figure out how to fit that into their day and, help them walk through that entire process. So, it also is a question of, well, how do you want to use? When do you intend to use? Some people have no intention whatsoever of using during the day. They only want to use it for sleep at night, no matter how much benefit that could provide them. Fine. I'm not going to spend your time or mine talking about something for during the day. What you do is at the end of that conversation, you get them something for night. And when you're ready, when you're comfortable and you want to try something for the daytime because you feel this is beneficial, let me know. We can have that conversation. For being in the dispensary, for me, I don't want to send people home with a garbage bag full of product either. They're going to get home, they're going to get overwhelmed, they're going to get confused, and it's going to go in a corner. They're never going to touch it. They spend a whole bunch of money on stuff that they don't even know what they're doing. So a couple of things and just a few days, maybe 5 to 10 days worth of medication so that they can try it, so that they can adjust some of the dosing on their own and again, slow and low. You can taper up to get that minimum effective dose and really keep those side effects to a minimum. But then they can come back and we can have a conversation about what happened, what they liked, what they didn't like, what changes they might want to make. And once they start to get stable and comfortable with what they're using, that's when we can start to have a discussion about prescriptions and how to potentially decrease medications and such too. Typically the first ones are they want off of their pain meds. No problem. We can work with that. We want to make sure that your doctors are aware so that when you go back to them and you have a half a bottle or 3/4 of a bottle full of pills, they're not, well, what's going on here? And the thing is especially with those medications, the way to do it is you're just going to start to realize you're not taking it as often as you needed it before. You're not going to just stop taking pills or anything else. It'll get to the point as you stabilize with cannabis that instead of taking that pain pill every 4 hours, it becomes every 6 hours, every 8 hours, every 12 hours, and maybe even none. So it's not something that you need anybody to just go cold turkey or just quit a medication. You do not want to do that. Very slow and low with that. And you want to make sure that the clinicians are aware of what's happening too, so that, when they're running their labs and doing their testing, they can attribute the changes to the appropriate, changes that you've made, whether it's your medications, your lifestyle, anything like that. So, really having those conversations and including the patient in their own healthcare is really a way to get them to try cannabis, to expand their options with cannabis. You can start where they're at. They don't want to smoke anything. They don't want to get high. Okay, topicals. Your knees, your back, your shoulder, your elbow all hurt. Guess what? We can put it on there as often or as little as we need to get relief for that. And, once they start to trust you and understand that you're not trying to just get them high and you're not going to send them on a long, bumpy ride they're not prepared to be on, they're going to listen to you and they're going to start to take some recommendations. And the funny part is the goal is for me to not have any more conversations with that patient because I've educated them enough that they can now go on this journey and, just check in with me every now and again if they have some random questions. But, the goal is to give them the information and the education so that they can now do this on their own and really just check in with us as necessary. So.
Thank you. That's awesome. What I'm hearing all of you say is that this is really patient-centered, tailored to the patient-centered care. And frankly, as a nurse, that's wonderful to hear because it doesn't really feel like that a lot of the time these days, certainly in the hospitals anyway. I wanted to ask about, we've touched a little bit earlier, we talked about hemp-derived cannabinoids, and I wanted to find out from you all if that's something that you educate patients on in terms of the different cannabinoids that are available. Do you provide that education to patients in terms of, CBDA might be more helpful for anxiety or things along those lines, and also terpenes. I personally am very curious about, whole plant medicine versus isolated cannabinoids. I see the value in whole plant medicine. I also see it in isolated cannabinoids. So in terms of educating your patients, I'm a nurse, right? So I have an interest in this, but patients may not. Do you go to that level with them? I'm sure you do it in a process like you were saying, Brian, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. And the answer is yes and no. It's so very relative to your patient and what they want to know. And even more so, what products are available. I don't want to talk to a patient about THCV and get them all excited about THCV because it can help with their diabetes and potential weight loss. And they're like, awesome, where do I get THCV? And I'm like, yeah, sorry, we don't have that. The same thing goes with terpenes. You can have these conversations and they are so important to have because these cannabinoids are so vital and we really don't have enough information about them, number one, to truly educate them appropriately. But the bigger thing is the terpenes change in every single product. This is Mother Nature that you're dealing with. So even though it's grown indoors under the same conditions, your terpene profiles do change in each particular plant every single time you get it. And I don't think that we're capable of truly testing all of the terpenes that exist. Dr. Dedimieri's information is right there. I mean, he's found hundreds and hundreds of cannabinoids and terpenes that are so minimal that they don't exist in the majority of plants. So why send patients on a fruitless journey? I know in Connecticut we have this information. We have all of the terpenes and the minor cannabinoids that are tested on the COAs. Most states don't even have that. Maine has no testing whatsoever. So where are you going to get this information? So I think it's really relative as to, number one, what cannabinoids are available. And number two, what the patient wants to know. Don't confuse them with all of this other information. Keep it simple. If you have a very educated patient that's more of a connoisseur, have these conversations. This is different. This is great. They understand. They've probably been involved in cannabis for years and truly get it. So it's great. It's a lot of fun to have those conversations and really get into the weeds, pun intended. But, it's just not fair to the patient a lot of times to provide them with this information that is only going to confuse them, and these products are not available for them to actually medicate appropriately with.
I'm going to piggyback onto what Brian just said. So I think many times with the majority of your patients, you just need to start with a basic overview of what the ECS system is, because most people, you say endocannabinoid system, and then you say you have over 200 receptors in your body and they deer in the headlights. They have no idea what you're talking about. So just breaking things down into segments so people have a greater understanding of what is really happening in their body. And then you can give them smaller bits of information about what it is that will help them. So I agree with you. The terpenes, it's great when you have a more educated, more sophisticated patient that you're dealing with. Those are, few and far between. So just giving people an overview of what the ECS is, what your body can do to help heal itself, and homeostasis, just getting back to homeostasis, which is where most people, I try and do a simple, like, here's where you are. We want you to get back to here. And people can understand that. And the visualization is very important too, because most people, a lot of the concepts are just, they don't understand them. So a lot of visual cues help. A slide. I mean, you show somebody a picture of a slide with things floating all around and it's like, look, now it's a circle. And before it was just dots. In whole plant medicine, as opposed to, I'm just going to touch briefly, there's a whole bunch of synthetics that are out there. And the synthetics are a huge part of the problem when we're dealing with this, because a lot of people love to vape. So you have people that are vaping tobacco products and then they vape other synthetics, which is where you see a lot of the people with the paranoia because of the distillates that are in the vapes and all of the other chemicals that we really can't identify well. And then you get the hypermotility, and then you get, again, the paranoia. So the isolates do have a place, but I think overall, again, when you start with basic information, that's the best place to start, and then you can go from there.
I probably spend a little more time and a little bit more education with my patients. I really feel like we're at a point we know more about our cars and our homes than we know about our bodies, sadly to say. So I try to break it down into cannabinoids, flavonoids, and terpenoids, and explain to them, look at the plant, look at the colors. Some of them are colorblind, so they don't know what they're looking at. So that's another conversation. But also smell. That's another thing. Early signs of Parkinson's is loss of smell. Okay. So this is where we start to target and say, smell things, and your nose knows. Your nose knows. So I tell people, don't look at the names, don't look at anything. And sniff the products if you can. Just go smelling everything and pick out a couple of smells that you like. And what they like one day might not be what they like another day. So we start there. And we then explain to them that these terpenes are found in your home. Your lavenders, your lemons, your pepper, whatever it is, so that they understand what spices that they can use, even if they don't want to use the cannabis. Then we break it down into what's hemp, what's not hemp. And I put it that way because every country has a different definition, but it's all cannabis. And we start with hemp hearts. That's what I usually have, a bag of hemp hearts on my table. Now everything's virtual, but we explain to them, if you don't want to start with anything, start with hemp. Food, 1 serving, 3 tablespoons, 10 grams of protein, 12 grams of omega-3, omega-6. This is where we start. They may like it, may not like it, but we start there. And then they get a little nutrition, and we explain to them that this thing called your gut is really your brain. And what they need to understand is that you mentioned homeostasis. And that's where I really explain to them, and then explain to them that you're going to find different things, but start there and you can modulate it. And then we explain to them that there's phytocannabinoids, there's what your body produces, endocannabinoids, and synthetic cannabinoids. And I explain to them that synthetic cannabinoids can be deadly, period, can be deadly, because they're synthesized in the lab too much. I don't know where they get it from. I don't even know how some of this stuff is made even. And that's what we have to explain to them. I want my patients and everybody, simple, become an educated consumer, become an educated customer. I don't trust my colleagues right now. I don't trust healthcare right now. Seriously. And so please understand, if you care about yourself, take care of your body. Very, very important. And whatever information you learn, share it. So the philosophy is reach 1, teach 10 is what I've been saying, because I can't be everywhere. But whatever information you learn, share it. And that's what I want people to know.
And on that note, I think one of the biggest disconnects that I've experienced both in the medical community and as well as a patient is that we clearly believe in cannabis as medicine. So I would love for someone to explain to me, and I don't expect it to be any of you three, how we have cannabis use disorder listed in the DSM-5. And I'm curious if anyone here, I realize y'all are not medical necessarily, but does anyone here know the criteria of cannabis use disorder, like 1 or 2 things? I know you do, Professor. 2 of the main things in cannabis use disorder in the DSM-5, and I should back up, the DSM-5 is a book that provides this criteria on a lot of different diseases to establish guidelines, right? So in the DSM-5, it includes, for cannabis use disorder specifically, issues about tolerance and withdrawal. And as we all know, if you're someone who's taking cannabis as a medicine, you're going to be taking it regularly, most likely. You're going to be taking certain amounts of different things. And so my question to you all, since it's here to stay, it seems for now, do you discuss cannabis use disorder with patients? And really, I'd love to just get your thoughts on it as clinicians, because to me, it seems like anybody who uses cannabis as medicine will get labeled with cannabis use disorder. that's a problem for a lot of reasons, because number one, the way we look at addiction in this country and substance abuse disorders in this country is not great. It's a problem for veterans. And so I'm curious, do you discuss that with your patients? Do they talk to you about it? Are they worried about becoming addicted? Dr.
My patients do worry about it, and some of them are addicts. That's why they're here with me. They come in with Suboxone, heroin. I mean, I see the extremes of addiction, including alcohol and nicotine. So I explain to them, any one of us can become an addict. Let's start there. Anybody can become an addict. So what I call it is overuse, abuse, and addiction. Because anything that if they can have a potential, the numbers are about 9 to 10% depending on when you start. So that's how we lay it out as. And we tell them because I have patients that they will just smoke and smoke and smoke and smoke and smoke and eat and eat and eat and eat because they have it. And that's a problem. So you have to address, and this is where the journaling is very important for me, because I want them to acknowledge, and there's a lot of psychiatric work I do with my patients side by side, but that's one of the most important things, is to explain to them that addiction is potential. So we tell them to take a holiday. Look at how much you're using. And we ask them, are you using more? Are you using less? And I can see how much they're buying. We have a system through the Cannabis Control Commission. We can see, is it accurate to the 100%? No. Is it a good idea? Yes. And we ask the patient, be honest, because this is a relationship that they have with me. It's a patient-doctor relationship. And we have I call it a personalized medicine. We have an independent personalized medicine. This is not one and the same for everybody, and it can vary. But we do explain, and if anything, take a holiday. Stop for a day, one day, and see how you do, and take it from there.
I have a little issue with the cannabis use disorder, just the terminology, because as you said, anyone can become addicted to something. And I think that with cannabis, many times the use is for relief of any number of symptoms. Part of the problem is not identifying why you're using it. So if you're using it for pain and you're smoking and it's not giving you enough relief, then you need to look at other avenues. You need to look at a tincture. You need to look at a gummy. You need to look at other forms of the cannabis to help relieve the pain for a longer period of time. If you are smoking because you're extremely anxious and it gives you that relief, again, it's only going to be for a couple of hours. So I think sometimes the focus is on people who smoke a lot, and really it's a lot deeper than that. But a holiday is definitely, if someone's overusing, is a wonderful idea. Sometimes it's difficult to kind of pinpoint, is it really an addiction? Is it overuse? I just think that there are different ways to look at it. So again, if someone's using cannabis in conjunction with an opioid and alcohol, then that's a much bigger problem, because a lot of people combine alcohol with cannabis. They like that feeling. And if that's what you like, then that's a bigger discussion. I mean, the alcohol potentiates the effect exponentially, and it can be extremely dangerous. You're much more likely to have an event from the effect of the alcohol with the cannabis than if it's just cannabis alone. And I have seen people, they're like, oh my God, I'm so high, I'm having a heart attack. I'm like, no, you're just really stoned and you need to go lie down and sleep it off. That's basically what you need to do. The fear factor is, my heart's pounding in my chest. Again, the concern is much more alcohol toxicity with the poly use than this. But used the right way, I mean, it's much better than, loading up on taking a, Vicodin and smoking a joint and then, taking a couple of tequila shots. Nothing against tequila, but I'm just saying, not a good idea.
Some great points. My short answer is no. I don't talk to the patients about it. Why? What is addiction, right? Addiction means that you're taking something that you can't stop taking without having some withdrawal, some side effects, and what does that mean? It's, you're with cannabis, you might have a little bit of anxiety for a couple of days. You might not sleep well for a couple of days. You're not going to be having seizures. You're not going to require a hospital stay. It's not as serious as what a lot of these other things are. And it's also not something that, now, if you are using it and it's impeding your ability to get a job or to function, that's a completely different conversation altogether. But most of the time for patients, they are looking to use this to get away from side effects of other medications. They are replacing other medications with this. If I'm getting off of my antidepressants, I'm going to have side effects. I'm not going to sleep well, and they're probably going to be a little bit more severe than what stopping using cannabis is going to be. Cannabis use disorder, part of my problem with that is they talk about the percentage increase in diagnosis of cannabis use disorder. Well, when you start from zero, you're going to have large increases. That's just part of the thing. And now that cannabis is legal in all of these states, a lot of clinicians that may not want to, approve of cannabis for one reason or another are very happy to just, label that as the problem that the patient's having and not look into other, drugs that they may be using, other drugs of abuse, other prescription medications that combinations might be causing issues as well. So I think it's very relative for patients. I mean, you're talking about 9 to 11% of addiction. And I think it's really something that if you have patients that are addicts already, which we deal with a lot of those, then that's a conversation that you do need to have. You do need to make sure that they're aware of that. But again, in Connecticut, we have the PMP system as well. And as a pharmacist in the dispensary, I can just look at your history and see what you've been using. And we can have a conversation about, well, I see you've bought, 4 ounces of flour in the last month. Maybe we should look at some tinctures or some edibles or something like that we can do this better for you. And that helps these patients not feel the need to medicate so often as well. And I think the idea, when you talk about medicating, a lot of, clinicians that aren't cannabis friendly or aren't in the cannabis industry, all they think of is smoking. And they think of smoking as an addiction, as cigarettes, as anything else, as a drug, not as a medication. So I think that just the smoking aspect in general gives it a bad look for cannabis, and which leads to a lot of these other assumptions that come with that.
Mm-hmm. In the interest of time, we want to make sure we can finish up by 12:30. I want to make sure we have time for questions. We have so many topics to talk about. I didn't even get into education for providers, but if there's anyone here, and Michelle, if there's anyone online, I want to make sure we include Zoom. If there's any questions for our panelists, we can leave room for those now. Karen, do you have a mic? Yeah, so Karen's walking around in the audience with a microphone.
My name is Asiu. I work with MariMed, Quality Assurance Manager. And Dr. Uma, you talked about being there, you see cannabis as medicine, and you in there for the patient and industry. And Robin talked about that you wish that every dispensary will have a nurse, a physician. Now, so being there for the patient and making the balance for industry as well, I want us to be able to look at, as a business, a dispensary business, you want to be there for the patient, but the law, for example, CCC says you cannot, a dispensary cannot be associated with a provider at the same place. So, and having a physician, having a nurse and a pharmacist, I know Connecticut has law mandates that will make it expensive for the owner of a dispensary. So how do we balance that? and how, in terms of advocacy, in terms of pushing for the interest of the business, interest of the patient, and changes in law. So this is to all the panelists. I mean, if you can all have a go at that. Thank you.
I look at cannabinoid medicine as a specialty. I treat it that way. I see my patients. I don't do one-year certifications. That's bull crap. Okay. I follow my patients. So this is where I think there's got to be a specialty. And that's got to be where, when you go to the pharmacist advise you. And I'm licensed in Connecticut. And I do believe that there should be the pharmacists have to be trained, because I get calls from pharmacists. How does cannabis interact with your medicines? What do I have to tell them? So each discipline has to be. I don't know about it all being in one place, because I do agree it's a very big expense. I think there needs to be separations, but there needs to be these available, and cannabinoid medicine is a specialty. And this is where the follow-up with the patients and people trained, and there must be follow-up. You can't give a card to a patient and say goodbye, and these mill markets that are happening. I can't stand it. And I fight for what medicine is for the patients and the medical cards to continue, and they must be mandating this. So that's a whole nother card. I get a little upset about it, but seriously, they have to be separated. So it should not be, because ultimately you're right. The patient then has to bear the expenses of everything that they have to get from the dispensary, and it shouldn't be that way.
Speaking as a business owner and an entrepreneur, there are many costs that we must bear as business owners that we do not pass on to our consumer. I think it's incumbent upon the dispensaries and the people that own in the corporations to bear that expense. And whether it's on a consulting basis, you hire us as consultants to work with your clientele. That's one way to solve it. I think another way is for all states to adopt the model that Connecticut has. I think that makes way more sense than telling people you can go to this doctor, they can certify you to get your card, but they cannot advise you on how and what it is that you should be using for your particular condition. It's much too complicated. Congress, I live in DC, all of the nonsense that comes out with policy and everything, it's maddening. You have no idea how maddening it is. I don't mean you don't have any idea, but it's extremely frustrating because we all sit here as experts and our goal is not just education and advocacy, but safe policy. And until we have safe banking and until this is not a federal issue, this is going to be ongoing. And that should be the focus. That has to be the focus because many people will not get into this industry to help people because they're terrified that they will lose their livelihoods, which is something that we all know live with on a day-to-day basis. But until we get to that point where we can offer sound medical advice to people, I don't really think there's much to really talk about.
I like simple answers. So the simple answer to your question is, what type of dispensary do you want to be? Do you want to be just dispensing weed, just selling weed, and that's all you do? Or do you want to be a medical facility that provides information and education to your patients and everything? Pretty sure everybody wants to say they want to be a medical facility and provide education and information to their patients. Well, show me. And a lot of times that means with dollars. It doesn't mean you need one of us in your dispensary 24/7, 365. I get that we are a cost limiting factor in all of these. I mean, you can see in states like New York where they're getting rid of the dispensary pharmacists now, and they can just be somebody on call, which that's okay. But I'll tell you, I can have a conversation with a patient on the phone and they get to that dispensary and maybe a product's out of stock or whatever. And you get 2-3 people that want to have a conversation and tell them what's better for them and why it's better because it's on sale and they need to sell this, that, and the other thing too. So, you really do need somebody there to have a conversation because they get very confused and very overwhelmed very quickly. Just the language. The verbiage is very different for people than it ever used to be in pharmacy or anywhere else. So just having those conversations and knowing the what words to use, sativa indica hybrid are just horrible words. However, this is what patients know. So we need to speak to them on that level. But if they just happen to think sativa sleep and, they're going along that, well, guess what? You're having two completely different conversations. So I think it really depends on what type of a facility you want to be. And you show that by having that personnel in your facility.
Michelle, go ahead.
Yes, this is from McKenna via the Zoom. How does the panel feel about the use of telehealth for certification and any appointments going forward?
I think it's a great thing. And I actually trained with telehealth, believe it or not, when I did family medicine. We learned to take call over the phone. Okay, and we would know which needed to be sent to the emergency room or not, and what had to wait and what didn't have to wait. So for everybody that didn't train that way, COVID is teaching them a new way to examine a patient. You could do a lot through telehealth. I do a lot. When I first started certifying, we did telehealth, and I used to have 4 different locations from one place that I used to certify. All of it through telehealth. It really depends on how you to use that appointment time and what you're going to do. So I really think it's a great thing and we should continue it. And I do it for all primary care things that we can handle. And there are definitely things that we have to see in person. But I think telehealth definitely needs to continue. It's not even just for the patient, it's also for the caregivers, because there's families that they have to take care of. And this is very important because I really feel that's what I do also. We get everybody involved. We get the patient, the caregivers, and their providers. I pick up the phone and I talk to their doctors if I have to.
Any additional questions? Yeah, Karen.
Hi. Okay. I was a little disappointed about the discussion of cannabis use disorder. I'm not anti-weed. I mean, I smoke weed, but I've actually had like a really different experience than that, because I had cannabis products that were harming me, but I was so addicted to them that I couldn't stop. And I went to Mount Auburn Hospital and I spent 2 weeks there and nearly died. So cannabis use disorder is a real thing. And it doesn't need other drugs. And it is really important to mindfully confront the hazards of this. And I really worry about this industry if health providers can't speak directly about that.
Well, I think our panelists did say they do speak to patients about it. And I think one of the biggest problems that we have with, and what I was trying to get at was that the criteria for the medical is not, we hold cannabis to a different standard than we hold other medications. So that's the problem with the DSM, number one. Number two, I think also because of the way we've set up these state-specific marketplaces, instead of having federal legalization, patients are not able to get a standard medication, right? So I don't know what products you were using. I don't know where you got them. I'm sorry that you went through that experience. But I also think that some of this falls on the federal and state regulations as they are, because they're woefully lacking, and medical providers can educate and do as much as they can, but patients ultimately are left to their own devices at this point as well. I'm just the moderator. Please feel free to add in.
No, I just wanted to address, so I certainly hope my comments didn't come across as because I certainly believe there is cannabis use disorder. A lot, and to back up Emily's point, and what we all said too, unfortunately, a lot of the products that are out on the market, and I'm not sure, I'm not asking you where you got your products. A lot of products that are on the market and on the gray market, as we call it, are untested. They're very strong. And as a master gardener, I can tell you anything that's grown and you don't know what the carcinogens or the arsenic or what the toxic levels are in the ground that the product is grown in can have a really deleterious effect on obviously what comes out of the plant. So thank you for sharing your experience with us. And I'm very glad that your experience was positive and that you were able to come out on the other side of it, because that's a very scary experience.
The key point that like, sure, the product itself was harmful, right? But my point is that cannabis use disorder is real because, and I know that because I hit the point where I suspected the product was harming me and I continued using it. Right? That is the hallmark. Right?
And absolutely,
Right? That's
absolutely, yeah,
the hallmark, and that is totally achievable.
absolutely, absolutely.
And it ruins plenty of people's lives. So
It does.
I'm not saying that we shouldn't, move forward. I'm just saying, like, if we can't talk about that really directly and honestly, then we will struggle to move forward.
I couldn't agree more. I think you're absolutely correct. And I think part of the problem that we're trying to point out is that the criteria for diagnosing it allows for many, many more people to be diagnosed with it than are as opposed to the ones that are truly affected like yourself. So it really dilutes that pool.
Yeah.
So, and I think,
Guidelines for mental health are pretty poor. So.
and I think that's the point that we were trying to make, is that we know it exists. We, unfortunately, because that pool gets diluted with so many more people being lumped into that group, we're not able to concentrate on cases like yours to really find out what those reasons were behind that and make sure that we can prevent those things going forward as well.
And I want to commend you also for speaking up, because this is all, we need to have these conversations. We need people who are willing to speak up and say this and also still be an advocate. I mean, how wonderful that you still find help from cannabis, but you can be really honest about what you've experienced. So thank you for bringing that up. We actually are at time. I'm so sorry, but we started late today. So we need to let everyone get to lunch because we've cut lunch to 30 minutes as it is. I'm going to let Jackie take
And we can continue